James slowly drifted back to consciousness in the stark, sterile environment of the intensive care unit, catching snippets of his wife's hushed phone conversation. Her words about his will sent a jolt of realization through him, prompting him to feign death. His mind snapped awake, as if an unseen force had reignited his awareness, though his body remained unresponsive. He barely opened his eyes, only to be greeted by the blinding whiteness of the room, forcing them shut again. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. God, where am I? Why do I feel so frail and devoid of strength? What happened to bring me here, he whispered to himself. The answer came from the faint beeping of monitors and machines stationed a few meters away. With a strained effort, James recognized the surroundings of a hospital room, but couldn't fathom how he ended up there or what had transpired. The harsh overhead lights impaired his focus, and a persistent buzzing in his ears mimicked an internal alarm. A sharp wave of pain shot through his mind, drawing a soft groan from his lips. Desperately parched, he longed for water, yet no one was there to quench his thirst, and no water was within his grasp. There was no mistaking that he was in a hospital, surrounded by an overwhelming array of medical equipment. Having never experienced such a setting, he had no point of reference. IV lines and various sensors were attached to his arms, rendering his body almost weightless. He lacked the strength to fully open his eyes, only managing to peer through narrow slits. Initially, the sounds around him seemed so muted and remote that he doubted his ability to hear. But then, a very familiar voice resonated nearby, quickening his heartbeat. It was his wife, Grace. Her distinctive tone and the slight hitch in her speech were unmistakable. A surge of tension gripped James as he tried to signal her, but just then, he heard the door creak open. Bracing himself, he expected anything but what followed. "Doctor, Merritt, please, how is my husband faring? Will he remain in this vegetative state for long, enduring endless suffering? Should we consider more drastic measures?" Grace inquired, infusing her voice with a plaintive note. A heavy silence enveloped the room momentarily before the doctor responded. "I have one piece of advice: do not tempt fate. Hope for the best. Your husband's prognosis is grim. But we cannot abandon hope. I also recommend you minimize your time here to reduce the risk of infection. Any improvement in his condition will be promptly communicated. For now, I must insist you leave the room." "Okay, you're right. Forgive me, I get it now," Grace sang in a sugary tone. Moments later, James heard the retreating footsteps and the gentle click of a door closing. He deduced that the female doctor had departed, leaving Grace standing by his bedside, lost in her contemplations. Suddenly, the businessman sharply heard the unexpected chime of a telephone in the intensive care unit. Its unnatural sound made him question the reality of his surroundings. James had always despised eavesdropping, considering it a dishonorable act, especially for someone of his stature. As the owner of one of the finest restaurants in the city, he prided himself on his integrity. Had he been well, he would have certainly left the room to allow Grace her privacy. However, his current condition forced him to listen to the unfolding conversation. "Hello, darling, is that you? Your number looks unfamiliar. Did you get a new one again? A will? Yes, I've written it. Where will it go? Yes, I've reviewed it thoroughly. Everything is just as I wanted, thanks to the notary who went through it. True, not for free. But you have to pay for everything. Yes, you know that." James's heart pounded violently after hearing his wife's words. Who was Grace speaking to with such affection? Her tone was not merely conversational but melodic. And what was this about a will? The following words dispelled any lingering doubts. "Yes, darling, I've just entered the room. Well, what can I say? My dear lies there like a vegetable, with no changes. I think with this, I'll manage the restaurant as I see fit. And when James is no longer here, I'll inherit it rightfully. Well, I must go now." I still have things to do. I love you. Goodbye for now." The sheer audacity left James gasping for breath. It was unimaginable discussing his imminent death in his presence and referring to him as a vegetable. Had he deserved such heartless treatment? Meanwhile, lying helplessly in his hospital bed, James couldn't fathom why the sensors meant to alert the medical staff of his regained consciousness hadn't activated. He recalled a similar scenario in a movie he had seen long ago, though the title escaped him. The essence of that plot, however, had been seared into his memory. Yet watching it unfold on screen was entirely different from experiencing it firsthand, especially when it involved the betrayal of his spouse. James felt no doubt he had been betrayed, but who had saved him from the raging inferno of the car crash? Who had risked their life for his? As consciousness began to fade, he was pulled back into the vivid memories of that fateful day. The morning had started like any other for James Williams, the esteemed owner of an elite restaurant. Rising with the first light of dawn, while most of the city still slept, he cherished the view from his house that overlooked a city just awakening to its daily rhythm. First, James prepared himself a simple yet satisfying breakfast. He poured a glass of fresh orange juice and quickly fried some eggs and bacon. Afterward, he spent a few minutes doing some light exercises to fully wake his body and get his muscles moving. Leading a healthy lifestyle was important to him, but he never imposed his habits on his spouse. He respected that everyone was different, and Grace was no exception. For instance, James was a vegetarian and abstained from animal products, yet he never judged those who enjoyed meat. Carrying his breakfast tray, James stepped onto the spacious terrace and sat at the table. Since it was winter, the terrace was enclosed, and a small fireplace crackled warmly in the corner. He relished the fresh morning air and the peaceful silence, pondering his plans for the day to ensure he could accomplish everything on his agenda. Grace was still asleep at this hour, leaving James feeling a touch of loneliness. After finishing his meal, James donned his favorite business suit and headed to work. He prided himself on arriving before opening time to observe who arrived punctually and who was late. Though he disapproved of tardiness, he refrained from harsh judgment, understanding that some delays were unavoidable. He was especially empathetic toward Emma, the dishwasher who commuted from the other side of the city and relied on the unreliable bus system, particularly during inclement weather. On that fateful morning, snow began to fall. At first it drifted leisurely, forming small swirls in the gusty wind. Soon it intensified, swiftly covering the rooftops in a blanket of white. James adored such weather, even though he knew it would likely result in a slow business day. Blizzards often deterred people from venturing out to enjoy a meal at his restaurant. Parking his car at the entrance, James pulled up the collar of his coat and braved the harsh weather. A sharp gust of wind whipped snow into his face, causing him to shiver and quicken his steps. The janitor, Henry, was already hard at work, shoveling the snow from the steps. Upon seeing the restaurant owner, the elderly man greeted him with a wave. "Good morning, Mr. Williams. The snow's coming down today, isn't it? It's the kind that gets into your bones." "Good morning, Henry. Are you handling the snow all by yourself?" "I told the security guard to help you during times like this," James remarked, concerned. "Oh, it's fine. I can manage, James. I'm used to it. Think of it as my morning exercise. A few swings of the shovel, and I feel alive again." James smiled warmly. "Exercise, huh? Well, let me have that shovel. I could use a good warm-up to get the blood flowing." Despite Henry's protests, the determined businessman insisted on helping. Amid the blizzard, passers-by were surprised to see the well-dressed restaurant owner expertly wielding a shovel, clearing the steps of snow. Henry watched with respect and a nod of approval as James tackled the task with vigor and determination. "I see you're quite skilled at this, James. Where did you get such extensive practice?" James chuckled. Where else? At my grandfather's place in the village, on the distant outskirts. He had quite a lot of fishing there. I'm not much into hunting, but picking mushrooms, berries, or fishing. Always up for that. In winter, the snow would pile up high. You'd wake up. And it's dark in the hut because the windows are covered in snow. So, you grab a shovel and start digging. The janitor looked at James with genuine admiration. James was a good man, always treating him with respect and often defending him against the bullying administrator. I remember that scoundrel Henry muttered, noticing the approach of Andrew. Mr. Williams, what are you doing? The wind is fierce, and you're out here shoveling snow. You'll catch a cold for sure. Where would we be without you? Andrew shouted over the wind. James turned and met Andrew's eyes, fully aware of the false concern in his tone. Oh, come on, Andrew. It's nothing. I'm not a child. How are things inside? Did the suppliers come through? Is everyone on duty? At the mention of the staff, Andrew's face twisted in annoyance. Yes, everything's in order except for that dishwasher. What's her name, Emma? No matter how much you reprimand her, she never shows up on time. James frowned, handing the shovel back to Henry. Andrew, you know very well that Emma has 4 children to care for on her own. And I've asked you not to refer to her as a dishwasher. She's a kitchen worker, a part of our team. Learn to respect your colleagues. You can't build a good workflow without respect. The sharpness of James's reprimand made Andrew shiver. He glanced nervously at Henry, who was grinning widely. The administrator felt humiliated but kept his thoughts to himself, planning to deal with the situation later. At that moment, a young woman appeared from around the corner, hurrying through the snow to get to work. It was Emma Fisher, looking flustered but determined. Ah, here comes Emma. What's the excuse this time? Did the bus break down, or is there a new story? Andrew began, but he fell silent under James's stern gaze. I'm sorry, Mr. Brown. The bus got turned around on the road. I had to find another way, Emma explained, her eyes downcast. James stepped forward, his voice gentle. Thank you for making the effort to get here, Emma. I know it's not easy with the weather and your responsibilities at home. Emma looked up, gratitude and relief in her eyes. Thank you, Mr. Williams. I'll get to work right away. As Emma hurried inside, James turned back to Andrew. Let's make sure we support our staff, Andrew. Everyone has their struggles, and it's our job to help them succeed, not tear them down. Andrew nodded reluctantly, swallowing his pride. Yes, Mr. Williams. James gave Henry a nod of appreciation. Keep up the good work, Henry. I'll be inside if you need me. Henry watched as James walked back into the warmth of the restaurant, feeling a renewed sense of respect for his employer. James's kindness and leadership were rare qualities, and Henry felt fortunate to work for such a man. All right, off you go, and make sure everything is in order. Clean the dishes thoroughly, so they squeak when I touch them, Andrew concluded with a stern look. Emma nodded and hurried towards the entrance. At that moment, she awkwardly stumbled on a step, causing the sole of her boot to skid on the surface. James was the first to react, catching her at the most dangerous moment. Oh, thank you. I'm sorry for being so clumsy, she began to apologize. Don't apologize, Emma. It's not your fault. But perhaps Andrew should finally get to work and sprinkle some salt on the pathways, James remarked, emphasizing the last word. He took Emma's hand to help her ascend the slippery steps. Despite not wearing gloves, her palm felt very warm to the businessman. Then something very strange happened. Emma suddenly let out a loud gasp and jerked her tiny hand away. What's wrong? Are you hurt? James asked with concern. Emma guiltily lowered her gaze, clutching her hand into a fist. She looked frightened, not like herself at all. I'm sorry. Please, it's not your fault at all. It must have been my imagination. Sorry again, Emma forced out, fear frozen in her eyes, a fear he could feel in his skin. But what was it about? What did James do wrong? Did he squeeze her hand too hard? No, it didn't seem like it. He shook his head in bewilderment, then hurried after Emma. He caught up with her in the hall, where he quietly called out to avoid attracting the attention of others. Emma, what happened? Why did you react so strangely? She froze and looked at him with a strange pity. I'm sorry. It's all because of my visions. What visions? James exclaimed in confusion. Emma paled. Well, the ones that come true, you know, like premonitions, but real. They started back in school when I got a concussion during a PE class. We were climbing a rope and I fell. The height wasn't much, but that's when it all began. The businessman frowned. And what did you, may I ask, see in these visions? Tears suddenly filled Emma's eyes. It's a car accident. What color is your car? Dark green. When I touched your hand, I immediately understood that the car would be involved in a terrible accident. But it wouldn't be your fault. It will be someone very close to you. I saw it the moment I touched your hand. It struck me like lightning. James stared at her, a chill running down his spine. Emma, are you saying that my car, that someone close to me will get hurt? She nodded, her expression filled with dread. Yes, James, I saw it so clearly. I'm so sorry. The weight of her words hung heavily in the air. James's mind raced, grappling with the bizarre and unsettling revelation. How could this be true? Yet the fear in Emma's eyes was undeniable. Thank you for telling me, Emma, he said finally, his voice steady but laced with worry. I'll be careful. And please, don't blame yourself for this. Emma gave a small, grateful nod, still trembling. I just hope I'm wrong. But please be cautious. James watched as she walked away, her shoulders hunched against an unseen burden. He couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just taken a turn into the unknown, guided by a premonition he couldn't fully comprehend. James looked at his colleague with a hint of irony. He didn't believe in any prophecies, of course. In his view, it was all nonsense, and fortune tellers and seers were nothing but charlatans. There was that one madam who predicted a long and thorny path to success for him back in his student years. So what? The path was indeed challenging, but it was hard work that got him there, not some mystical prediction. Emma noticed his skeptical expression and felt a pang of concern. Excuse me, Mr. Williams, but I would advise you to refrain from driving for a while, she said softly. James just smiled. Oh, don't worry, Emma. I've been driving for over 10 years without any issues. I never exceed the speed limit, so there's no need for unnecessary concern. All right, an accident is not in my cards. Emma nodded reluctantly, looking at James as if he were already doomed. All right then, get back to work and try not to dwell on the negatives. By the way, how are your little ones? If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask. I'll help however I can, James said as he headed to his office. Thank you. Everything's fine, Mr. Williams. I wanted to ask for your permission for something, Emma cautiously replied. Permission? Of course, go ahead. What do you need? James responded. Emma hesitated for a moment, gathering her courage. I want to ask if I can take home some of the dishes that customers reject, just one or two. I'll pay for everything, don't worry. Can it be deducted from my salary? James smiled warmly. Yes, of course. What's the matter? And no payment is necessary. They're going to be disposed of anyway. Besides, it seems both you and the kids will benefit. Take as many as you want. It's just leftovers. Joyful sparks lit up in her eyes. This was real luck. Meanwhile, James went about his usual business, talking on the phone with the restaurant manager, approving menus, and preparing for inspections to ensure everything ran smoothly. Yet, from time to time, Emma's words echoed in his mind, stirring a strange unease. Can you believe it? A kitchen worker with fortune-telling abilities. That's a first for me, he thought. But soon, thoughts of a possible road accident faded away, overtaken by meetings with new suppliers, tasting new dishes, and discussing current restaurant matters with the administrator. James maintained an atmosphere of trust and cooperation, resolving disputes gently and using the stick far less often than the carrot. Time passed quickly, and before he knew it, 3 hours had flown by. The fury of the storm outside had subsided somewhat, and the city's utilities had surprisingly managed to clear most of the vital roads. Although there was still an hour and a half left in the workday, James decided to leave early. He had a romantic plan brewing in his mind for the evening. Determined to make this February evening special, James decided to pamper his spouse with a gorgeous bouquet of roses, a bottle of fine wine, and something delicious from his restaurant kitchen. The thought of surprising Grace filled him with excitement, pushing aside any lingering doubts about Emma's premonition. While the last 2 tasks were a breeze, finding flowers in the snow-blanketed city became a true odyssey. To James's utter dismay, nearly every flower pavilion was shut. It seemed the vendors had decided that no one would brave such weather to buy flowers. Just when James was about to surrender to despair, he spotted an open shop at the corner of the street. With a heart brimming with relief, James parked his car and stepped inside. The pavilion was filled with the delightful aroma of roses, tulips, and freshly imported mimosa. The calendar marked the end of February, with just under 2 weeks until Women's Day. A friendly girl quickly helped James assemble the perfect bouquet. His heart soared with joy as he anticipated a romantic evening with his beloved, eagerly awaiting his return. James knew Grace rarely cooked dinner for him, aware that he preferred dining out. He brought fruit and vegetable platters, champagne, and a couple of divine dishes prepared by Chef Frank. Upon arriving home, he didn't bother ringing the doorbell. Instead, he used his key to enter. Entering the hallway, James heard soft music emanating from the bedroom. Grace must be watching her series again, he mused as he carried the bags into the kitchen. He left the bouquet in the living room, planning to present it to her later. With a smile on his face, he entered the bedroom. The bouquet slipped from his hand, and a rose lost a couple of petals. Grace wasn't there. The TV was on, but she was nowhere to be found. Panic set in. Where could she have gone in such a snowstorm? What if something happened to her? She wasn't confident behind the wheel, that much was true. He had to check if her car was still in the garage. A frantic thought flashed through his mind. As he was about to leave the bedroom, an urgent news broadcast reported a foreign car had fallen off a city bridge half an hour ago, driven by an inexperienced girl. His heart pounded. My God, it's Grace. It must be. I even transferred money to her card to buy a new dress. That's why she went out, he thought. Rushing to his car, James drove like a madman towards the bridge. Twice the car skidded, but he managed to regain control. His driving skills and familiarity with his vehicle's limits paid off. But Grace was a novice driver. Why did he even give her that car? Just under 2 miles from the bridge, his car skidded again. He slammed the brakes, but they failed. He faced a dire choice: swerve into a ditch or crash into a small car parked by the roadside. He chose the ditch. The car rolled multiple times before crashing into a tree. The last thing he remembered was the sharp smell of gasoline from the ruptured fuel tank, needing just a spark to ignite. Now he lay in a hospital room, the persistent beep of life support machines his only company, reflecting on the events of that night. James realized he had made a fatal error that evening. The girl who fell from the bridge wasn't Grace. When events move at lightning speed, reason falters. Only now did he understand that his wife had been meeting her lover all along, valuing him above everything else. And then there was the will. How could he forget? Grace had urged him to draft it a few months ago. It hadn't seemed suspicious then, but now it took on a sinister significance. The thought of his wife's betrayal tormented him, preventing him from accepting his fate. Pretending to be in a coma, James shut his eyes tightly to avoid revealing any signs of consciousness. He sensed his wife's cold, calculating gaze, her hands itching to disconnect him from life support. The temptation was so strong that her hands trembled, and her lips formed a hard line. The most painful realization was that he was powerless to stop her. Danger was so close he could feel death's cold breath on his neck once more. Fortunately, the sharp sound of high heels clicking against the concrete floor echoed through the corridor, prompting Grace to hurriedly retreat. A minute later, the familiar voice of Dr. Merritt filled the ward. "It's astonishing. She's ready to bury him alive, you know. Why do people marry such vipers?" His companion paused briefly before replying. "What's surprising about that? They say this patient owns a top-notch restaurant in the city, and he's made a will." From the tone of the voice, James deduced that the speaker was a nurse. Dr. Merritt then approached James's bed and commented aloud, "Strange, some of the sensors are disabled, Erica. Probably a malfunction. We need to call a specialist to check it out, however. It takes time for a patient to come out of a coma. I'm confident he'll survive against all odds and prove that miracles can happen." Erica nodded, and after watching the doctor leave, began to adjust the malfunctioning sensors. Before she could turn one of them on, James whispered, "Water. Give me water." Startled, the nurse nearly jumped in place. "So, you've woken up. Why didn't you signal?" Gathering his strength, James replied, "Please don't tell anyone I've regained consciousness. We can't deceive the attending physician, but let it be a secret for today." Erica considered his request. Given his wife's behavior, it seemed understandable. "All right, but you can't drink yet. The best I can do is moisten your lips," Erica whispered. James closed his eyes, acknowledging she was right. Moments later, a wet piece of cotton, soaked in water, touched his lips, providing the needed moisture. He gently parted his lips to extract the precious liquid. It wasn't much, but it was enough to reassure him that he was alive and had escaped the burning car. As James reflected, Erica set up an IV drip to nourish his body. Tears of gratitude filled his eyes as he observed her care and dedication. "No, they won't get my will and inheritance. I will recover and not give Grace a penny in the divorce," he thought, convinced of the justice of his words. Swallowing the lump in his throat, James closed his eyes and drifted into a restful sleep. Meanwhile, Erica entered Dr. Merritt's office and relayed everything. Dr. Merritt listened quietly, understanding that Erica was acting in the patient's best interest. "I won't inform his wife of any progress. If I were her, I'd be praying day and night for my husband's recovery. But this woman only thinks of her inheritance. Thank you for your vigilance, Erica." Joyful sparks lit up in Erica's eyes. It wasn't that she found James particularly attractive, it was her desire to help that outweighed everything else. "Can you make it even longer?" ChatGPT. Fortunately, the sharp sound of high heels clicking against the cold, hard concrete floor echoed through the corridor, causing Grace to hurriedly retreat. Her hurried footsteps faded, replaced by an eerie silence. A minute later, the familiar and reassuring voice of Dr. Merritt resonated through the ward. "It's mind-boggling. She's ready to bury him alive, you know. Why do people marry such vipers?" His conversation partner paused briefly before responding. "What's surprising about that? They say this patient owns a top-notch restaurant in the city, and he's made a substantial will." From the tone and familiarity of the voice, James deduced that the speaker was a nurse. At that moment, Doctor. Merritt approached James's bed and remarked aloud, "Strange, some of the sensors are disabled, Erica. Probably a malfunction. We need to call a specialist to check it out. However, it takes time for a patient to come out of a coma. I'm confident he'll survive against all odds and prove that miracles can indeed happen." Erica nodded and, after watching the doctor leave, began to methodically adjust the malfunctioning sensors. Her movements were deliberate and careful, showcasing her dedication to her profession. Before she could turn one of the sensors back on, James mustered the strength to whisper, "Water. Give me water." Startled by the unexpected sound, the nurse nearly jumped in place. "So, you've woken up. Why didn't you signal?" she asked, her voice a mix of surprise and relief. Gathering his remaining strength, James whispered, "Please don't tell anyone that I've regained consciousness. Of course, we can't deceive the attending physician, but let it be a secret at least for today." Erica considered his unusual request. Given his wife's suspicious behavior, it now seemed somewhat reasonable. "All right, I'll do everything I can, but you still can't drink. The most I can do is moisten your lips," Erica whispered back. James closed his eyes, accepting that the nurse was right. A few minutes later, a piece of cotton soaked in water touched his parched lips, delivering much-needed moisture. Trying to quench his thirst even a little, James gently parted his lips to squeeze out the precious liquid. Although it was insufficient to fully satisfy his thirst, James didn't insist on more. The primary thing was that he was alive and hadn't perished in the flaming car. While James reflected on his narrow escape, Erica set up an IV drip to ensure his body received essential nutrients. Tears of gratitude glistened in James's eyes as he witnessed her dedication and care despite the circumstances. "No, they won't get my will and inheritance. I will recover and not give Grace a penny in the divorce," he thought, becoming increasingly convinced of the righteousness of his words. Struggling to swallow the lump rising in his throat, James closed his eyes and drifted into a sweet, restorative sleep. At the same time, Erica made her way to Dr. Merritt's office and relayed everything that had transpired. "Doctor." Merritt listened attentively, understanding that his subordinate was acting with the patient's best interests at heart. "Well, I won't tell his wife that there's progress in his treatment. If I were in her place, I'd be praying day and night for my husband's recovery, but this woman only thinks about grabbing her inheritance. Thank you for your vigilance and dedication, Erica." Joyful sparks lit up in Erica's eyes. It wasn't that James was particularly attractive to her, it was simply that her desire to help others outweighed everything else. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing that she had made a difference. Meanwhile, James's mind, though exhausted, was abuzz with thoughts. He couldn't believe the treachery he had narrowly escaped. His wife's betrayal was a knife to his heart, yet it fueled his determination to survive and reclaim his life. The thought of her trying to end his life to gain his wealth filled him with a mix of sorrow and rage. He vowed to expose her and protect his hard-earned legacy. As he lay in the hospital bed, drifting in and out of consciousness, memories of happier times with Grace floated through his mind. He remembered the love they once shared, the dreams they built together. How had it all come to this? The realization that she had been meeting with another man, valuing him more than their marriage, was a bitter pill to swallow. But amidst the heartache, James found a renewed sense of purpose. He would recover, not just physically but emotionally, and he would rebuild his life from the ashes of this betrayal. In the days that followed, James's condition slowly improved. Erica continued to provide excellent care, ensuring he received the best possible treatment. Her kindness and compassion were a stark contrast to the cold, calculating demeanor of Grace. With each passing day, James grew stronger, his resolve hardening. Dr. Merritt, true to his word, kept Grace in the dark about James's progress. He knew that revealing the truth could put James in further danger. Instead, he focused on helping James recover, employing every medical expertise at his disposal. The bond between doctor and patient grew, rooted in a shared goal of defying the odds and witnessing a miraculous recovery. As James regained his strength, he began to formulate a plan. He would confront Grace, expose her deceit, and ensure she paid for her betrayal. But first, he needed to gather evidence and allies. He reached out to trusted friends and associates, discreetly sharing his story and seeking their support. The more people knew the truth, the safer he would be. James's journey to recovery was long and arduous, filled with moments of pain and doubt. But with Erica and Dr. Merritt by his side, he persevered. The hospital room, once a place of despair, became a sanctuary of hope and determination. Each day brought him closer to reclaiming his life and setting things right. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the city, James stood by the window of his hospital room. He gazed out at the bustling streets, filled with people going about their lives, unaware of the turmoil that had engulfed him. But in that moment, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was ready to face the challenges ahead, to confront Grace and her lover, and to rebuild his life on a foundation of truth and resilience. With a final glance at the city, James turned away from the window, a determined look in his eyes. He knew the road ahead would be tough, but he was ready. He would rise from the ashes of betrayal and emerge stronger than ever, proving that even in the darkest of times, hope and perseverance could light the way. At the same time, Grace showed up at the restaurant and began to assert her dominance, setting her own rules with a fiery intensity that matched her red hair. She resembled a tempest, sweeping through the establishment with an air of fierce authority. Taking advantage of her husband's prolonged coma, now entering its third week, Grace seized the opportunity to take control of the restaurant. Her cold, piercing gaze cut through each employee, reflecting her disdain and utter disregard for their individuality. The head chef was the first to feel her wrath, receiving a stern reprimand and a fine for using ingredients deemed too expensive. This is Williams, but it's not like that. Everyone knows that the quality of ingredients directly affects the final dish, the chef protested, his voice tinged with frustration. Grace's cheeks flushed with anger. Don't you dare argue with me. What I say goes. From now on, all decisions are made by me alone. If you can't accept that, go find work at a roadside diner. Your talents might be better suited there. All right, Mrs. Williams, I understand, the head chef replied gloomily, lowering his head in resignation. Andrew, the administrator, smirked. He preferred Grace's aggressive management style over James's more lenient and attentive approach. Approaching her with a sycophantic eagerness, he remarked, Mrs. Williams, might I suggest installing hidden surveillance cameras for added control? Grace looked at Andrew with surprise, clearly pleased. Are there such cameras here already? The administrator smiled with satisfaction. Of course. Mr. Williams rarely used them, preferring to trust his staff. But since his accident, I've kept them on. It's immediately clear who's doing their job and who's slacking. Invaluable, Grace exclaimed, eliciting a pleased smile from Andrew. A few minutes later, Grace started reviewing the recordings, monitoring every move of the staff. Initially, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Waitresses bustled around the dining hall, the head chef commanded in the kitchen, and the waiters greeted guests at the entrance. Everything seemed routine until Grace noticed a recording from the previous day showing a young dishwasher, Emma, carrying a bulky bag. Look at her, so clever. What could she possibly be taking in that bag? Probably stealing from the fridge right under my foolish husband's nose. Grace decided to catch Emma red-handed. Let's see how you explain this when I confront you. Poor Emma was blissfully unaware that she had been under surveillance. The hours dragged on as Grace eagerly awaited the moment of reckoning. As Emma's shift ended, she grabbed a few leftovers approved by the head chef and headed for the exit. She had done this many times before, ever since James allowed staff to take home some untouched dishes. But today, things were different. As Emma reached the doorway with her canvas utility bag, Grace stepped forward triumphantly. "And where do you think you're going with that bag full of delicacies? Planning to just walk out of my restaurant?" Emma froze, her face paling with shock. "Mrs. Williams, I was just taking home some leftovers." "Mr. Williams said it was okay." Grace's eyes narrowed. "Don't lie to me. Do you think you can just help yourself to whatever you want?" "Not under my watch." Trembling, Emma replied, "I'm not lying, I swear." "Mr. Williams allowed it." "Well, Mr. Williams isn't here now, is he? I'm in charge, and I say no more freebies. Empty the bag." With shaking hands, Emma opened the bag to reveal a few pieces of bread, some vegetables, and a small container of pasta. Grace's face softened slightly, realizing there wasn't much, but her anger didn't dissipate completely. "Fine," Grace snapped. "You can go this time, but don't let me catch you doing this again. Understand?" "Yes, Mrs. Williams." "Thank you," Emma whispered, hurrying out of the restaurant. Grace watched her leave, a mixture of satisfaction and frustration churning inside her. She had established her authority, but the confrontation left her feeling hollow. As she turned back to the restaurant, she realized that ruling with an iron fist came at a cost. The fear in Emma's eyes lingered in her mind, a stark reminder of the power she wielded and the responsibility that came with it. Returning to her office, Grace sat down and sighed. She needed to be firm, but she also needed to find a balance. Her husband's legacy depended on it. She couldn't afford to let emotions cloud her judgment. With renewed determination, she resolved to lead the restaurant to success, no matter the challenges ahead. As the days passed, Grace's rule over the restaurant became both feared and respected. She implemented strict policies, closely monitored staff performance, and made it clear that she was in charge. Employees who once enjoyed a relaxed atmosphere now worked with a new level of diligence and caution. The restaurant ran like a well-oiled machine, but the warmth and camaraderie that James had fostered began to fade. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Grace sat alone in her office, feeling the weight of her responsibilities. The restaurant was thriving under her command, but at what cost? The strained faces of her employees haunted her thoughts. She missed the days when James's gentle leadership created a family-like environment. Just as she was lost in her thoughts, the door opened, and Andrew stepped in. "Mrs. Williams, I thought you might need some company. It's been a tough day." Grace looked up and managed a weak smile. "Thank you, Andrew. It has been tough, but necessary." "You're doing a great job. The restaurant is more efficient than ever," Andrew reassured her. Grace nodded, appreciating his support. "I just hope it's worth it. Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing the right thing." "You're strong and capable. The restaurant needs someone like you to steer it in the right direction," Andrew said, his voice filled with admiration. Grace sighed. "Thank you, Andrew. Your support means a lot." As Andrew left, Grace leaned back in her chair, reflecting on his words. She had taken control of the restaurant with the best intentions, but she needed to remember the values that James had instilled. There had to be a way to balance firmness with compassion and efficiency with warmth. Determined to find that balance, Grace decided to make some changes. She would maintain the high standards she had set, but would also strive to reconnect with her employees. She realized that true leadership wasn't just about enforcing rules, it was about inspiring and supporting those who worked for her. The next day, Grace called a staff meeting. She addressed her employees with a newfound sense of purpose. I know things have been difficult recently and I've been strict, but I want you all to know that I value every one of you. Together we can make this restaurant a success, not just through hard work, but through mutual respect and support." The staff listened attentively, and for the first time in weeks, Grace saw a glimmer of hope in their eyes. She had been harsh, but now she was ready to lead with a balance of strength and compassion. The path ahead would still be challenging, but Grace was determined to honor her husband's legacy and create an environment where everyone could thrive. Emma flinched, her eyes filled with genuine sadness and despair as she looked at Grace. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Williams, but I haven't stolen anything. These are just leftovers, the ones that were paid for but remained untouched by the customers." Grace sneered with contempt. "Untouched, you say? And who decides that? Could it be you, sweetheart? You seem to have a nice little setup for yourself. What do we have here? Oh, a Caesar salad, only half eaten, but it doesn't change the essence. You're quite the gourmet, aren't you?" Tears welled up in Emma's eyes. She never expected the new manager to turn everything upside down so easily. "Oh, please, no need to cry, okay? Your crocodile tears are of no use to me. Understand that once you lose your job, you can shed them every minute if you want," Grace remarked harshly. Emma sniffled and began rummaging through her bag. What made the situation even more upsetting was that just half an hour ago, she had paid for these dishes with her future salary. Now she faced dismissal on charges of theft she didn't commit. "Oh, looks like we caught a fish in the net, and the surname matches Fisher. And you were still hoping for the boss," remarked the approaching administrator, Andrew. Grace exchanged a meaningful glance with him and continued to scold Emma. "But I didn't take it for myself, it was for the kids," pleaded Emma. "Oh, spare me your family drama. I couldn't care less about how many kids you have, 3, 4, or 5. It's your business. You gave birth to them. Deal with it yourself," Grace snapped bitterly. "She only has 2 of her own and 2 more from her husband's first marriage," Andrew added obligingly. "They're all mine, and as for what my husband left, let it remain on his conscience. He's in prison now, caught stealing. He thought the kids would help him reduce his sentence, but I managed to get his rights revoked," Emma muttered through tears. Grace remained unmoved. She needed a scapegoat to show her power to everyone else, and Emma, unfortunately, became just that. "So, Fisher, right? You're fired. You can go wherever you want," Grace concluded, gesturing towards the door. Despair froze in Emma's eyes. How could this be? Could she be dismissed like some unwanted stray dog? Andrew, not wanting to stay on the sidelines, added his 2 cents. "Oh, and I almost forgot, Fisher. Don't count on your salary, understand? The money will go towards compensating the damages." The news was a devastating blow to Emma. Realizing that she had been deceived by everyone, she went outside and exposed her heated cheeks to the freezing wind. Seeing her distress, Henry, the janitor, couldn't help himself and approached her. "Shh, dear, don't cry, don't torment yourself, sunshine. You know Andrew is in favor right now, that's why he's doing whatever he pleases. When Mr. Williams recovers, his reign will come to an end. And so that you don't end up completely without money, I'll allocate some from my pension for you. You can repay it whenever you can." "No rush," said Henry, embracing the fragile woman by the shoulders. "Thank you, Henry, for your support and protection. You see, I was counting on this money so much, and then this happened. We're struggling with the kids in a rented apartment, and the landlady keeps raising the rent, saying you receive child benefits, so you won't become poor." Emma replied, choking back tears. The elderly man shook his head, feeling deep sorrow for Emma. She was such a good colleague, calm, diligent, never speaking ill of anyone. She washed dishes up to her elbows in hot water, and that was it. And this Andrew, the administrator, was a first-rate troublemaker. Henry remembered him from his work at the high school, where he had been a craft teacher for over 40 years. "I remember Andrew from back in the day," Henry said. his voice tinged with nostalgia and frustration, always looking for ways to climb up the ladder, stepping on whoever he needed to. Don't let him get to you, Emma. People like him never last long. When Mr. Williams is back, things will change. Emma nodded, wiping her tears. I hope so, Henry. I just don't know how much longer I can hold on. The kids need me, and I can't let them down. Henry patted her shoulder gently. You're stronger than you think, Emma. Keep your head up. Better days are coming. As Emma walked away, her heart felt a mixture of gratitude and despair. She had always tried to do her best, but life seemed to throw challenge after challenge her way. Grace's harshness and Andrew's conniving ways made her daily existence a living nightmare. However, Henry's kindness provided a small glimmer of hope amidst the darkness. Back inside, Grace and Andrew continued their ruthless management. Grace felt a twisted sense of satisfaction from her power play, yet there was an underlying emptiness. Despite her fierce exterior, a small part of her wondered if she had gone too far. Andrew, on the other hand, thrived on the chaos. He relished his newfound influence, enjoying the fear and respect it brought. He believed he was securing his position, but he was blind to the brewing resentment among the staff. As the weeks passed, the restaurant's atmosphere grew tense. Employees whispered in hushed tones, morale plummeted, and a sense of unease permeated the air. Grace's strict policies and Andrew's meddling created a toxic environment. The camaraderie and warmth that once defined the workplace were replaced by fear and suspicion. One afternoon, as Grace was reviewing the finances, she overheard a conversation between two waitresses. I can't believe how things have changed. It's unbearable working here now, one of them said. I know, replied the other. Mr. Williams would never have allowed this. I hope he recovers soon and puts an end to all this madness. Grace felt a pang of guilt. She had justified her actions as necessary for the restaurant's success, but the cost was becoming evident. She had alienated her staff and turned the place into a hostile environment. That evening, as she sat alone in her office, Grace reflected on her decisions. The power she wielded felt hollow when it came at the expense of the people who made the restaurant thrive. She thought about James, his kindness, and the respect he garnered from his employees. She realized that true leadership wasn't about instilling fear, it was about inspiring loyalty and trust. Determined to make amends, Grace decided to change her approach. The next morning, she called another staff meeting. Her tone was softer, more reflective. I know things have been difficult recently, and I've been strict. But I want you all to know that I value every one of you. Together, we can make this restaurant a success, not just through hard work, but through mutual respect and support. The staff listened, surprised by the change in her demeanor. Grace continued, I'm implementing some changes to make our work environment better. We'll be restoring some of the old policies Mr. Williams had in place, and I'm open to hearing your suggestions on how we can improve things. There was a moment of silence before a tentative applause broke out. For the first time, Grace saw a glimmer of hope in their eyes. She had been harsh, but now she was ready to lead with compassion and understanding. The path ahead would still be challenging, but Grace was determined to honor her husband's legacy and create a workplace where everyone could thrive. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the restaurant began to shift. Grace made a concerted effort to reconnect with her employees, listening to their concerns and working with them to find solutions. Andrew, sensing the change in Grace's approach, became more cautious, his influence waning as Grace regained the staff's trust. Emma, too, noticed the changes. Grace approached her personally, apologizing for her harsh treatment. I'm sorry, Emma. I was wrong to accuse you without proper evidence. You're welcome to return to your job, and we'll ensure that everyone is treated fairly. Emma, though still wary, appreciated the gesture. Thank you, Mrs. Williams. I just want to do my job and support my family." Grace nodded. "And you will. We're all in this together." As time went on, the restaurant began to regain its former glory. The staff, motivated by Grace's renewed leadership, worked with a sense of purpose and dedication. Customers noticed the positive changes, and the restaurant's reputation flourished. Grace learned that true leadership wasn't about control and power, but about empathy, respect, and collaboration. She honored James's legacy by fostering a supportive and inclusive environment, proving that even in the face of adversity, change for the better was always possible. Once a brash and arrogant student, Andrew showed no mercy to those less fortunate or physically weaker than himself. Henry had tried in vain to confront and shame Andrew for his cruel behavior. One fateful, pitch-black night, a fire broke out in the workshops where students honed their craft skills. Fingers were quick to point at Henry, accusing him of carelessly discarding a cigarette, even though Henry had never smoked and was meticulous about fire safety. The true culprit, however, was Andrew, who had maliciously set the fire with a gang of teenage friends. Lacking the evidence to prove Andrew's guilt, Mitrick was unjustly dismissed from his teaching position, his employment record forever tarnished. The crafts teacher, already in retirement, was not overly troubled by his dismissal, as his financial situation was already secure. 17 years later, fate conspired to reunite Andrew and the now elderly janitor, albeit in vastly different circumstances. Andrew feigned ignorance of their past connection, but Henry Brooks, wise from years of life's experiences, was not easily fooled. Meanwhile, James, embodying honesty, kindness, and fairness, was the epitome of the leader one should aspire to be. Emma clutched the money Henry had given her as she made her way to the bus stop, determined to catch her bus on time. The remnants of a recent snowstorm loomed on either side of the road, with dirty gray mounds of snow lining her path. Lost in her gloomy thoughts, Emma trudged through the cold when she heard a faint murmuring. She turned quickly, thinking Henry might be calling after her, but there was no one in sight. A sharp frost bit at her nose and cheeks, the chill acting like a reminder of the harshness of winter. The mysterious sound repeated, drawing Emma's attention to a nearby snowdrift. Realizing someone was in distress, she approached cautiously and was horrified to find a man with a bloody head lying unconscious in the dirty snow. Her initial thought was that he had drunkenly fallen and injured himself. However, as she leaned closer, it was clear he was sober. Without hesitation, Emma hoisted the man under his arms and struggled to get him to his feet. Slowly regaining consciousness, he muttered deliriously, "Damn, how could this happen? Bastards, don't touch Jack." Ignoring his incoherent ramblings, Emma supported his weight and led him to Henry's shed. Henry, seeing Emma's flushed face, immediately understood the situation. Together, they laid the injured man on an old folding sofa turned cot. Henry, retrieving bandages, cotton, and antiseptic from a first aid kit, sighed with relief. "Let's treat his wound. He'll recover soon enough." "Shouldn't we call an ambulance?" Emma asked, anxiety etched on her face. Henry shook his head. "No, dear, there's no need to distract emergency services. I wanted to be a doctor once but failed the entrance exams. I spent a year and a half in medical school and trained as a nurse, but luck wasn't on my side. I became a laborer instead. I know how to provide first aid. This lad is tough and street smart. He'll make it through." Emma's tense expression softened into a sweet smile as the injured man opened his eyes, groggily turning his head to take in his surroundings. "Easy there, buddy," Henry cautioned. "No sudden movements. Just lie still and regain your senses. Do you remember your name?" The scene was one of unexpected connection and compassion, with the harshness of the night giving way to the warmth of human kindness. Connor forced a strained smile. "Of course I remember. My name's Connor Sawyer. I got beat up over a dog. Some rich kids decided to have some fun tormenting a stray named Jack, who settled near the meat pavilion and isn't afraid of people. When I saw them bullying him, I jumped in to help. Took down 2 of them. But the third one clobbered me on the head with something. Henry nodded with a mix of sympathy and admiration. Yeah, I've seen that kind of cruelty before. Don't worry, Connor, you can stay here as long as you need. I have firewood and a stove to keep you warm and comfortable. Connor's eyes filled with gratitude as he looked at Emma, who had stopped to help him in his time of need. Emma glanced at her watch and sighed heavily. Looks like I'll need to take a taxi now. There go my savings, I've missed the bus, she said, her voice tinged with regret. Connor, feeling guilty, sniffled and turned his face to the wall. Forgive me, please. I didn't mean to cause any trouble. Life's been pretty rough lately. Just 3 weeks ago, I pulled a rich guy out of a burning car. Maybe you heard about it, it was all over the news. Emma's face went pale as she recalled a revelation about Mr. Williams's future. We did hear about it. That man was the restaurant owner where Henry and I used to work, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Henry nodded in agreement. Yes, Connor, you saved James. That was no small feat. We owe you a debt of gratitude. Connor winced from the pain in his neck. I was just in the right place at the right time. U.S. vagabonds, we stick to our territories. But when I saw that car accident and the smoke, I couldn't just walk away. The gas tank could have exploded any second. People were screaming, but no one was helping. I couldn't just stand there. Henry's respect for Connor deepened. You, my friend, are a true hero. Risking your life for someone you didn't even know, that's remarkable. Connor touched his wound gently, lost in the memory. I saw that man trapped in the car and ran straight for it. Smashed the window with a cobblestone and pulled him out. Amid the chaos, with everyone yelling about the gas tank, I managed to drag him about 10 meters away before the car exploded. You have incredible courage, Connor, Henry said solemnly. Emma looked at Connor with warmth and admiration, realizing the profound connection between their actions. Needing to leave, Emma called a taxi to get home to her 4 hungry children, Nathan, Anna, Peter, and Emily. Meanwhile, James lay in a hospital bed, slowly regaining his strength. Though he could barely hold a spoon and fork, Erica and Dr. Merritt kept their promise, skillfully deceiving Grace, who planned to disconnect James from life support to claim her inheritance. On the 5th day, James, now more coherent, called Erica over. I need your help with another plan, he whispered. Erica looked at him incredulously. You can't be serious, James. You just came out of a coma less than a week ago, and now you want to leave the hospital. James's eyes were determined. I know it sounds crazy, but I have to do this. Trust me. Erica shook her head, worried. James, I can't take that responsibility. What if something goes wrong? I could be held accountable. James reached out, his voice pleading. Please, Erica, I need your help. I promise I'll be careful. Erica sighed deeply, torn between her duty and her loyalty to James. All right, but we need a solid plan. This can't go wrong. And so, with careful planning, they set the stage for James's daring escape, determined to right the wrongs and reclaim his life. Desperation froze in James's eyes. Help me reclaim my life, Erica. I'll sign any document you want, acknowledging the risks and absolving the clinic of all responsibility. Erica shook her head, but deep down, she knew she couldn't refuse him. Grace had been insufferable, eager to rid herself of her husband by any means necessary, showing no regard for decency or loyalty. All right, I agree, but we go together, okay? It'll be safer for both of us. We'll go in the evening, a couple of hours before lights out, Erica proposed, and James immediately agreed. Truth be told, he preferred it this way since he still wobbled when walking and could lose his balance at any moment. Okay, Erica, but let's keep this secret. Not even Dr. Merritt should know. No one can know, James pleaded, his eyes filled with hope. Erica nodded, beginning preparations for the breakout, gathering emergency medications and borrowing a walking stick from another patient. As James lay in bed, summoning the strength for the plan he had been mulling over for days, he thought of Emma. Tears welled up as he remembered her words. God, she was right. She saw it all so clearly, and I, the fool, didn't believe her. Now I'm paying for my arrogance. And Grace. She's got a lover and is after my assets. I'll deal with her, but not with her barbaric methods, he thought bitterly, closing his eyes and pretending to be unconscious. Time dragged on, but when Erica finally arrived with a set of clean clothes, James knew there was no turning back. Here, put these on. They're my ex-husband's clothes. We divorced ages ago, but he never took them. I think they'll fit you, Erica said with a reassuring smile. James dressed as quickly as he could, fighting against his exhaustion, and followed Erica. The injuries from the accident took their toll, forcing him to stop every few feet to catch his breath. Erica, understanding his weakness, supported him and kept their journey as short as possible. She had also arranged for a private driver who didn't ask questions or rush them. Arriving at his home, James felt a surge of anxiety, his heart pounding in his chest. Erica looked at him with concern, but it was too late to turn back. He had to see this through. Only then would their efforts be justified. Stepping out of the car, he shivered in the cold wind and approached the door. He had his keys, but as he tried to turn the lock, he realized they didn't fit. Grace changed the locks. She adapted quickly, he muttered, putting the useless key back in his pocket and ringing the doorbell. A familiar, cheerful melody filled the air. Erica stood a little way off, waiting patiently. Footsteps echoed from inside, and the door opened to reveal the muscular figure of Grace's lover, wearing James's bathrobe, an old birthday gift from his late mother. James froze, his gaze challenging the man. "Who's there, darling? Not the utilities again, I hope? I've paid everything in advance so we could relax at the resort." Grace's voice floated from the depths of the house. James's face turned pale, and he clenched his fists. Grace immediately understood the situation and, without shame, fell to her knees. "James, please forgive me. It's not what it looks like. I thought you had only a few days left. The doctor didn't give any hope. Miracles don't happen, do they, darling?" Grinding his teeth, James replied through clenched teeth, "You have 5 minutes to pack your things and leave this house." Grace's lover straightened up, looking at James with a sneer. "Listen, you washed-up businessman, go get treated and stop meddling in normal people's lives. Too bad you didn't crash harder." James's fists tightened until his knuckles turned white, but he maintained his composure. "I'll give you 5 minutes. After that, I'm calling the police." Grace scrambled to her feet, dragging her lover inside. "Come on, let's just go. This isn't worth it." As they hastily gathered their belongings, James stood in the doorway, a storm of emotions raging within him. Erica stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You did the right thing, James." James nodded, "It's time to take back frustration and relief mingling." "Thank you, Erica. I couldn't have done this without you." Once Grace and her lover were gone, James and Erica stepped inside the house. The warmth and familiarity of his home enveloped him, bringing a sense of peace and determination. He was ready to rebuild his life, stronger and wiser than before. James gripped the handle of his cane so tightly his knuckles turned white, the weight of his determination seeping through his entire being. "You won't have to wait, you bastard. You thought you buried me alive, but I survived against all odds. I know the accident was no coincidence, and I will uncover the truth behind it." At these words, the bully's bravado crumbled like a sandcastle in a storm. He slinked off, his shoulders sagging as he disappeared deeper into the house to change. The illusion of a perfect, fairy tale relationship with Grace shattered instantly, giving way to a harsh reality. Now it was time for retribution. Though James couldn't yet prove Grace's involvement in the accident, he swiftly acted to cut off her financial lifelines, blocking all her cards and accounts with a single call. Once upon a time, James had lifted Grace from provincial obscurity, transforming her into what she only pretended to be, a businesswoman. But this betrayal was unforgivable. Long ago, he had even shielded her from fraud charges she claimed were false. In reality, she was a hardened criminal, driven solely by greed and the thrill of deception. With fresh determination, James contacted the investigator, urging a re-examination of his ex-wife's case. Hearing this, Grace's face contorted in rage and desperation. She grabbed a heavy vase, intending to strike James and end his interference once and for all. But Erica, ever vigilant, intercepted Grace's hand just in time. As they struggled, the unmistakable sound of police sirens grew louder. Several police cars screeched to a halt outside, and armed officers emerged, ready to bring justice. For Grace and her lover, it was the end of the line. James looked at his handcuffed ex-wife with a mixture of sadness and relief, then collapsed from sheer exhaustion. Had Erica not been there, he might have slipped into another coma. Instead, he gently sank to the ground, supported by Erica's caring hands, her touch a lifeline amidst the chaos. James awoke the next morning to the soft murmur of familiar voices. This time, it wasn't his wife plotting his demise with her lover. It was the comforting sound of his loyal friends, the janitor Henry, the dishwasher Emma, and the homeless hero Connor. Blinking against the morning light, James immediately recognized the man who had saved him from the burning car. He reached out, embracing Emma with one arm while listening to Connor's hesitant explanation of why he had remained anonymous. Connor feared the attention his heroism might bring, preferring the shadows to the spotlight. As he listened, James knew with certainty that he wanted Connor to manage his restaurant. This sentiment was echoed by Emma, who had proven her dedication and hard work. She had earned a promotion, whether to waitress or even assistant chef, the choice was hers. James was ready to fulfill any of their desires, their loyalty and bravery deserving of the highest rewards. But first, he had something deeply personal to address. His feelings for Erica had blossomed amidst these trials, growing stronger with every challenge they faced together. He wanted to confess them publicly, to let her know how much she meant to him. Tears sparkled in Erica's eyes as she listened, and her response brought a storm of applause from everyone present. "Yes, I agree, but please stay away from hospitals in the future," she said, her voice a blend of relief and joy. Connor smiled, subtly winking at Emma. He hinted unmistakably that he supported the young businessman and was ready to become the father of her 4 children, or perhaps even 5. Who knows? With mutual respect and love, everything else would fall into place: weddings, pregnancies, and the joyful laughter of children. James's journey had been fraught with betrayal, danger, and the test of human resilience. He had faced the depths of despair and emerged stronger, surrounded by those who truly cared for him. As he looked around at his gathered friends, a profound sense of gratitude washed over him. He had been given a second chance at life, love, and happiness. The future that lay ahead was bright, filled with the promise of new beginnings. Together, they would rebuild not just James's life, but also create a supportive and loving community. Henry, ever the dependable janitor, would continue to offer his wisdom and care. Emma, with her diligence and warm heart, would thrive in her new role. Connor, the brave and selfless hero, would bring his strength and integrity to the restaurant. And Erica, the woman who had stood by him through every storm, would be his partner in every sense. They would share their lives, their dreams, and their love, building a future that neither of them had dared to hope for before. As they sat together, sharing stories and laughter, James felt a peace he had not known in years. He had fought through the darkness and emerged into the light, surrounded by those who truly mattered. His heart, once heavy with sorrow and betrayal, now brimmed with hope and love. At that moment, he made a silent vow to cherish and protect the family he had found. No longer bound by the past, James looked forward to a future filled with endless possibilities and the boundless joy of being surrounded by true friends and the love of his life. As we conclude this video, we hope you've gained valuable insights and inspiration from our discussion. Reflecting on what you've learned so far, we encourage you to share one key takeaway that you plan to put into practice in your own life. We'd love to hear from you, so please leave your comment below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your support helps us continue to bring you meaningful content. Thank you for watching.